From a quiet village to the world's grandest stage, her music spoke what words never could. Z News was playing softly in the corner of the small living room, its sound barely heard over the chirping of birds outside. Mira sat on the floor of her modest home, polishing the old wooden violin she had owned since she was 15. It wasn't a fancy instrument, its strings had been changed many times, and the bow had a tiny crack near the tip, but to Mira, it was priceless. That violin had been with her through every stage of her life. It was more than an object. It was her voice, her diary, her dream, in her small village. Everyone knew Mira. Some called her Mira Didi, others said Mira Ma'am. For most of them, she was the kind and patient woman who taught their children music under the neem tree near her house. No one really knew how talented she was. They just knew she played the violin beautifully, that her music calmed their minds, and that their children smiled more after spending time with her. But there was something Mira had never told anyone. A secret, not because she wanted to hide it, but because she had accepted long ago that the world outside her village didn't care about women like her, quiet, unmarried, living in a broken house, with no certificates to prove her talent. She had grown up in a family of 5, her mother, father, and 2 younger brothers. Her father, a schoolteacher, used to play a battered harmonium in the evenings. Her mother sang folk songs while cooking, and little Mira would hum along. One evening, when she was just 8, a traveling musician performed in their village and played the violin. That was the first time Mira had heard the sound of that instrument. She stood in the front row, mesmerized, her heart pounding with every note. That night, she told her father she wanted to learn the violin. It took her father almost a year to save enough money to buy her a second-hand one. It was old and scratched, but Mira didn't care. She practiced in the mornings before school, in the evenings, after homework, and sometimes secretly late at night when everyone was asleep. She didn't have a teacher. No one in the village played the violin, so she listened to radio music and old cassette tapes of El Subramaniam and Yehudi Menuhin. She imitated their sounds again and again until she could play parts of them by memory. By the time she was 12, she could play entire classical ragas by ear. She didn't know the names of the techniques she used. She didn't know what vibrato or staccato meant, but she could make the violin weep, laugh, and sing. Her fingers moved not with the speed of a trained musician, but with the emotion of someone who felt every note. Deep in her soul, when she turned 15, a music teacher from the city visited the school for a cultural event. He heard her play and was stunned. "Where did you learn this?" he asked. Mira shrugged shyly. He told her father she was a prodigy and that she needed formal training. He helped her apply for a scholarship to a music school in Europe. She was selected. The family celebrated with sweets. Neighbors came to congratulate them, and for a few weeks, Mira dared to dream of stages, concerts, and lights. But dreams have enemies. A few days before she was to leave, her father had a stroke. Her mother, overwhelmed and fragile, begged Mira not to go. "We can't manage without you," she said. "Your brothers are too small." Mira didn't argue. She stayed. She sold the scholarship violin to pay for her father's medicines. The letter of admission, once proudly stuck on the wall, was removed and kept in a drawer. Years passed. Her brothers grew up and left for city jobs. Her parents passed away. And Mira, now in her 40s, continued to live in the same house, teaching children how to hold a bow, how to pluck the right string, how to listen to silence between notes. She never blamed her family. She never cried about what could have been. She found joy in small things, in a child playing a full song without a mistake, in the birds that sang with her music, in the wind that danced when she played Rag Malhar. Yet, sometimes late at night when the village slept and the world was quiet, Mira would sit by the window, hold her violin, and play pieces she had once only heard on foreign tapes. Difficult pieces, complicated pieces, pieces that made world-class performers sweat. But for Mira, they flowed like a river. She didn't think of them as difficult. She didn't even know how famous they were. She played because she loved to. She played because it was the only time she felt completely free. One such night, she was playing Paganini's Capriccio, 24, her favorite challenger. Young boy from the village happened to walk past her house. He stood outside the window, eyes wide, He had never heard anything like that before. He told his schoolteacher the next day. The story spread quietly among the villagers. Mira Didi can play music that sounds like 10 people playing together. But no one outside the village heard that story. Many kilometers away, in Mumbai, the name Arjun Rao was known by every music lover. He was young, proud, brilliant, and believed no one could match his skill. He had studied in Vienna, performed in Berlin, and been praised by the New York Times. But his performances, though flawless, lacked warmth. Critics often said, "He's a master technician, but something is missing." Arjun had no idea that in a quiet village, a woman who had never set foot on a stage could make even simple notes feel like poetry. Fate is funny. It brings people together in the most unexpected ways. One morning, Mira received a visit from a man in a suit. He said a big music festival was being organized in the nearby city. They wanted to show a local artist during the event to add color and diversity. Mira said no. She didn't believe she belonged in such places. But the villagers insisted. Her students pleaded. And finally, she agreed. Half out of love, half out of curiosity. She didn't know who else would be there. She didn't know that Arjun Rao himself would be performing on the same stage. She just knew that she would carry her old violin, wear her simple cotton sari, and play from the heart. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the biggest shock of the event would not come from the man with 10 international awards, but from the quiet woman who had played under a neem tree for 20 years. And this was only the beginning. The sun was shining brightly on the streets of Indore as banners were being hung from poles and posters stuck on walls. Global Strings Music Festival, celebrating the soul of the violin, was written in bold letters. The large photo of Arjun Rao, the world-famous violinist, in the center. His sharp jawline, confident smile, and shining black violin were enough to attract thousands. He was the star of the event. The media was buzzing with excitement. Socialites, musicians, and students from all over the country were coming to attend. The festival, behind the scenes, the organizers were busy planning something different this year. They didn't want the festival to be only about celebrity artists. One of the sponsors suggested adding a local flavor to the show. Find someone from a village nearby, the sponsor said. Someone simple. It will look good on the media. Big star meets unknown talent. It'll go viral. They liked the idea. It sounded like a heartwarming touch. The festival committee started searching for a suitable local violinist. One of their junior volunteers happened to hear from a friend about a woman in a village near Duas who plays like a miracle. That woman, of course, was Mira. A young man named Sahil was sent to meet her. He reached Mira's village in a shiny white car that attracted half the children of the area. He walked into her yard where he found her teaching 5 small kids how to play basic scales on their violins. The kids sat cross-legged on the ground, completely focused. Mira looked up and smiled politely. She offered him water and listened quietly as Sahil explained everything. "You will be part of a huge event," he said, showing her the poster. "Arjun Rao himself will be performing. You'll get to play on the same stage. Porters, TV channels, big names, everyone will be there." Mira's smile faded a little. She had never performed outside her village. She felt uncomfortable even imagining herself on such a grand stage. She politely said, "I don't think I am the right person for this. I've never done anything like it." Sahil tried to convince her. He said it would be an honor for the village, that the event needed someone like her, and that she wouldn't have to stay long, just one short performance. The villagers, overhearing the conversation, gathered around and encouraged her. "Mira Didi, you must go. You always teach our children so well. Now it's time the world sees what you can do. You've done so much for us. Let us see you on stage for once." After much hesitation, Mira agreed. Not because she wanted fame or applause, but because she couldn't say no to the people who had always respected her. She thought it would be a one-time experience, something to laugh about later. She didn't expect it to change anything. On the day of the performance, she wore her best cotton cerise simple cream with a blue border. Her hair was tied neatly, and she carried her old violin in a handmade cloth case. A village neighbor dropped her at the city auditorium in a borrowed jeep. The scene was overwhelming. Bright lights, cameras, people in shiny clothes, huge screens showing Arjun Rao's image again and again. It was a different world. Mira quietly found a seat in the backstage waiting area. No one paid much attention to her. Volunteers were too busy managing schedules and VIPs. Everyone assumed she was just part of a small cultural filler before the real event began. Meanwhile, Arjun Rao had arrived in style. A long black car, 2 assistants carrying his violin and bottled water, and a publicist constantly on her phone. Arjun didn't speak to anyone unless needed. He had been through hundreds of such festivals. To him, this was just another performance. Backstage, a stage manager told Arjun about the local artist. "Just a short 5-minute slot before your performance, sir. A woman from a nearby village should be fine, right?" Arjun frowned. "Is she even trained?" he asked coldly. "We don't want some screechy mess before my set." "Don't worry, sir," the manager said. "We'll keep it short, just for the audience to feel good." Curious and slightly irritated, Arjun asked to meet her. When he walked up to Mira, he was surprised. She didn't look like a performer. She looked like a schoolteacher on a temple visit. Her violin case looked like it belonged in a museum. He raised his eyebrows. "You play the violin?" he asked, his tone casual but cold. Mira nodded. "Yes, okay," he said, almost smirking. "Let's see how good you really are. Why don't you play something difficult?" The room went silent. Mira, a little surprised, asked, "What would you like me to play?" He thought for a moment. "Play Paganini's Caprice, No. 24. There was a low gasp from one of the junior musicians standing nearby. Caprice, No. 24 was one of the hardest violin pieces ever written. It was a piece known for speed, technical mastery, and perfect control. Even seasoned performers spent years trying to play it properly. Arjun had chosen it on purpose. He wanted to show the difference between someone like him and a village-level player. It was his way of saying, "Know your place." Mira looked at him calmly and said, "Okay." The stage lights dimmed slightly. The host stepped onto the platform and said into the mic, "Before we bring you the brilliant Arjun Rao, let us welcome a special guest, someone from just a few kilometers away who teaches music to children and has never performed for a city audience. Please welcome Mira Devi." She walked slowly onto the stage. The spotlight was harsh on her eyes, but she didn't flinch. She sat on the small wooden stool, adjusted the shoulder rest of her violin, closed her eyes for a second, and placed the bow on the string. No one expected what happened next. The moment her fingers moved, something magical filled the air. The first few notes of Paganini's Caprice No. 24 came out clean, confident, and full of feeling. It wasn't just technical perfection. It was music with soul. The audience, which had been whispering and checking their phones, suddenly sat up straight. Each variation in the piece was delivered with power and grace. Her fingers danced over the fingerboard with unbelievable ease. The rhythm was precise, but her phrasing made it sound like a conversation between the violin and the audience. Her eyes remained closed most of the time, lost in the world of notes, not even noticing how many jaws had dropped open in disbelief. Backstage, Arjun stared at the screen, frozen. He couldn't understand how this simple woman could play such a challenging piece with such purity and ease. Her posture, her bowing technique, control it was like watching someone who had trained under the best maestros in the world. But what shook him even more was the emotion. There was something in her music that he had never felt in his own. Performances, a quiet intensity, a truth, tenderness that couldn't be faked or taught. When the piece ended, there was complete silence for a second, and then came the applause. Loud, unstoppable, and filled with wonder. People stood up from their seats. Some whistled, others clapped with both hands raised. A man from the front row shouted, once more. But Mira simply bowed her head slightly and walked off stage with the same calmness she had come in with. As she passed Arjun, her eyes met. He said nothing. Neither did she. But in that brief moment, something shifted in him. He, the great Arjun Rao, had tried to insult her, but instead she had left him speechless, and the night was not yet over. The stage lights had not yet cooled down when Mira walked quietly back into the backstage area, her violin still resting in her hands. Her fingers were calm, but her heart was beating fast, not because she had been nervous about the performance, but because the moment she began to play, it had felt like the music had taken control. She had gone somewhere else, into a world where there was no audience, no fame, no expectations, just her and the notes she loved. Behind her, the applause still echoed. People in the auditorium were murmuring in disbelief. Some were asking who she was, some were checking the festival brochure to read her name again. Others were simply silent, still trying to understand how someone who looked so ordinary could create such extraordinary music. She had not only played Paganini's Caprice No. 24, she had made it her own. Arjun Rao was still standing near the stage monitor, frozen. He had never experienced this kind of confusion before. All his life he had believed in one truth, that excellence came only from hard work, expensive education, and elite training. He had studied under the greatest teachers in Vienna and Paris, spent hours perfecting his posture, his speed, his control. And yet, in just a few minutes, this woman, this unknown, untrained woman, had delivered a performance that made his own feel hollow in comparison. He tried to explain it to himself. Maybe it was luck. Maybe she had practiced only this one piece for years. But deep down, Arjun knew it wasn't just luck or practice. It was something deeper. She had something he didn't, something he couldn't name. The stage manager came up to him and said, "Sir, you're on in 5 minutes?" Arjun nodded slowly and walked toward the stage entrance. His assistant handed him his black-polished violin, but for the first time in years, Arjun's hands trembled just a little. He took a deep breath, stepped onto the stage, and was met with roaring applause. But he knew that applause wasn't just for him anymore. It was mixed with the echo of the woman who had performed before him. He played his set as perfectly as always flawless notes, perfect timing, precise technique. But something was missing. The audience enjoyed it, clapped generously, but the energy had changed. There was a strange tension in the air. No matter how well he played, the performance felt like a follow-up act, not the main event. For the first time, Arjun Rao, the man who had always owned every stage he stood on, felt like a shadow performer. After the show, the media crowd rushed backstage. Reporters had come prepared to talk to Arjun about his international achievements, his upcoming concerts, and his future plans. But now they were more interested in the woman who had stunned the audience. Where is she from? What is her training background? Has she played internationally before? We heard of her? Arjun overheard some of the questions and felt a strange mix of emotions, shock, pride, and a sting of jealousy. But above all, he felt curiosity. Who was she, really? While reporters were still trying to get to Mira, she sat in a quiet corner, slowly cleaning her violin with a piece of cloth. She looked calm, even a little unaware of the storm she had just created. A few journalists approached her with cameras and notebooks. "Madame, how did you learn to play like that? Did you train abroad? Is Arjun Rao your teacher? Will you go on tour now?" Mira smiled politely. "No, I've never trained abroad. I've never had a formal teacher. I've only played in my village." Her answers created even more confusion and excitement. One young reporter was especially persistent. He asked if he could visit her village and write a story about her life. She wasn't used to attention, but she gently agreed, thinking it would be good for her students. Later that night, Arjun returned to his hotel room, but he couldn't sleep, kept replaying her performance in his mind. The purity of her music, the confidence in her fingers, the depth of emotion in every note disturbed him. Not in a bad way, but in a way that forced him to ask himself uncomfortable questions. Was he truly an artist, or just a technician? Was he playing music, or just showing off skill? Had he ever made someone cry with a note like she did? For years, Arjun had performed in the biggest auditoriums, been featured in top magazines, and taught masterclasses to students around the world. But none of them had touched his soul the way this unknown woman had in just 10 minutes. The next morning, the festival's official YouTube channel uploaded Mira's performance. Within hours, it began to go viral. People across the country started sharing the video, calling her the village virtuoso, the hidden diamond, and India's real violin queen. Musicians reacted with shock and admiration. Some said she was better than most global artists. Others said she played like someone blessed by the gods. Within a few days, her name was everywhere. National news channels invited her for interviews. Music schools called her to offer teaching positions. A famous violin maker from Chennai offered to gift her a new handmade violin, but Mira quietly returned to her village, untouched by all the noise. When she reached home, her students surrounded her, clapping and hugging her. The villagers welcomed her like a hero. But Mira just smiled and said, "I'm still your teacher." Now back to practice. One evening, a black car arrived at her house. Out came Arjun Rao. The same man who had once looked at her with doubt now walked up to her with respect in his eyes. He wasn't wearing his usual branded clothes. He looked tired, thoughtful, even a little nervous. She invited him inside, served him tea, and waited silently. Arjun finally spoke. "I came to say thank you." Mira looked confused. "Thank you for what?" "For reminding me what real music sounds like," he said. There was a long pause. Then he added, "I've been performing for years, winning awards, traveling the world, but that night, you played something I haven't felt in a long time. Made me realize I've been chasing applause, not emotion." Mira listened quietly. She didn't interrupt. She had nothing to prove. He continued, "I want to learn from you, if you'll allow me." Mira smiled. "We all learn from each other. You have things I've never known. I only play from the heart." Arjun stayed. For a few days in the village, he watched her teach, saw the bond she shared with her students, and slowly began to understand that greatness doesn't always come from stages or certificates. Sometimes it grows in silence, in corners the world forgets, nurtured by love, passion, and sacrifice. He joined one of her evening classes. Sitting under the neem tree with 10-year-old kids, holding his violin like it was his first day. The students giggled. The villagers watched in amazement. And Mira just smiled as she began to teach. And somewhere in the background, the music played again, not on a grand stage, but in a simple yard filled with dusty feet and open hearts. And it was beautiful. Mira's village, once peaceful and quiet, slowly started becoming a place of excitement and curiosity. People from nearby towns, journalists, music teachers, and students began visiting regularly. Some came to meet her, others came just to take a picture with the woman who had become an overnight sensation. Her humble home turned into a strange mix of old simplicity and new attention. But Mira herself hadn't changed. She still woke up early, did her housework, and taught her students under the same neem tree every evening. To her, life was still about music and helping children fall in love with it, but not everyone was happy with the sudden fame. Some musicians, especially those who had trained for years in classical institutions, started to feel jealous. How can someone with no degree or certificate become the face of Indian violin? One teacher complained during a seminar in Mumbai. Is this what we want to promote, a talent without discipline? Another added. There were articles online where people questioned her ability. Some claimed she had secretly trained abroad and was lying for attention. Others said she had only played one good piece and would never be able to repeat it. Some went further and accused her of faking the video with digital tricks. Mira didn't respond to any of it. She simply continued her routine. Meanwhile, Arjun Rao had changed in ways no one expected. After spending a week with Mira in her village, something inside him had softened. He had started listening to music instead of just performing it. For the first time in years, he began writing new compositions, not for fame or shows, but for the joy of creating something honest. Asia's assistant noticed the difference to Arjun had become calmer, more humble, even a bit playful. One day, Arjun called a press conference in Mumbai. The media expected a big announcement, perhaps a world tour or a new music album. But Arjun stood in front of the cameras and said, "I want to tell you all about the best musician I've met in my life. Her name is Mira. She's not from a conservatory or a fancy school. She's from a small village, and she plays from the soul. I've come to learn from her, and I think we all should." The room went quiet. Then the questions began. "Are you saying she's better than you?" one reporter asked. Arjun smiled and replied, "She's better than me in all the ways that matter." That interview went viral. The people who had doubted Mira now wanted to know more. TV channels begged her to come to their studios. A famous reality music show sent her a formal invitation to be a judge. One international music university even offered her an honorary doctorate. But Mira declined all these offers one by one. When a reporter asked her why, she simply said, "I have nothing to prove. I didn't start playing music to be famous. I started because it helped me feel something I couldn't express with words. That's enough for me." But the world wouldn't leave her alone so easily. One morning, she received a letter with a golden seal. It was an invitation from the Vienna Music Conservatory in Austria, the very place Arjun had once studied. They wanted Mira to come and conduct a special session on emotional intelligence in music. It was the first time in the institute's history that someone without a formal degree had been offered such an opportunity. Everyone in the village celebrated. It was like the entire place had been blessed. Local leaders, school teachers, and even strangers came to wish her well. But Mira felt unsure. It wasn't fear, it was something else. She had never been on an airplane. She didn't speak English fluently. And more than that, she didn't want to become something she wasn't. She sat under her neem tree that evening and discussed it with her students. One of them, a 12-year-old girl named Pooja, said, "Didi, if you go, they will learn from you, but if you don't go, we will never get to say that our Mira Didi taught the world." Those words made Mira smile. That night, she packed her bag, just a few clothes, her violin, and a notebook filled with songs she had written over the years. The next morning, she boarded a flight to Austria. Her first flight was full of wonders. The window showed clouds, like soft cotton, and she looked at them with childlike wonder. When the plane landed in Vienna, the airport lights and signs overwhelmed her for a moment. But a young student from the conservatory was waiting with a placard that read, "Welcome, Mira Devi." The next few days were filled with rehearsals, interactions, and questions. The students at the conservatory were shocked by her story. Some couldn't believe someone could become so good without ever reading Western musical notations. But when Mira played in front of them, even the most skeptical ones fell silent. She didn't speak many words during the sessions. Instead, she asked them simple things. "When you play a sad song, do you remember a time you cried? Or when you play something happy, do you feel like dancing inside?" The students were confused at first. They had been trained to focus on precision, speed, and perfection. But Mira pushed them to listen to their own hearts. "Play it like you mean it," she would say. One student, a shy boy named Lucas, always struggled with performance anxiety. Mira asked him to close his eyes and think of his grandmother, who used to hum lullabies to him. When he played after that, his hands stopped shaking, his eyes welled up with tears. And for the first time, the whole class gave him a standing ovation. Word about Mira spread through Vienna. She was invited to perform in one of the oldest music halls in Europe. The audience included scholars, artists, and famous composers. Mira stepped on the grand wooden stage with her simple cotton sari and the same old violin. She didn't give a speech. She didn't use any fancy equipment. She simply began to play. This time, she didn't play Paganini. She played a song she had written years ago, lullaby inspired by the nights she had spent crying quietly after her parents passed away. It was a soft, slow, gentle piece filled with pain, comfort, and healing. People in the audience felt emotions they didn't expect. Some cried silently. Others closed their eyes, holding on to every note like it was a memory from their own childhood. After the performance, there was no sound for a few seconds. Then slowly, the hall filled with applause, not loud and dramatic, but steady and respectful, like the heartbeat of appreciation. A well-known composer stood up and said, "We just witnessed something pure. This is why music exists." Back in India, the village held a gathering in the schoolyard. They had set up a projector and a screen so they could watch the live stream of Mira's performance. As the music filled the night air, children sat quietly. Elders wiped their eyes. Proud smiles covered every face. Mira returned after 2 weeks. She stepped down from the train at Dua station and was surprised to see her entire village waiting. People carried flowers, posters, and even small handmade trophies. They treated her like a queen, but she remained the same. She thanked everyone, hugged her students, and went straight home to her little room, placing her violin on the bed, as if greeting an old friend. Later that evening, Arjun visited again. He brought her a small gift, a blank diary. "It's for your new compositions," he said. Mira smiled. "I don't need pages. The music writes itself in the heart." He nodded, understanding her better now than ever before. And as the sun set over the village, the sound of violins rose once again under the neem tree. Mira was home, but the world had changed. And this time, it had changed with her. Mira's return to her village after the Vienna concert was quiet, just like the way she had always lived. Even though the whole village had come to receive her at the station. Even though her name was now known in places she had never even heard of, Mira herself was unchanged. She still wore the same kind of cotton saris, carried the same old violin, taught her little students under the neem tree without missing a single class. But life around her had started to shift in ways she never expected. A few weeks after her return, letters and emails began to pour in. Not just from India, but from all over the world. Music teachers from Japan, Germany, and Argentina wrote to say how moved they were by her Vienna performance. Students from famous institutions said they had watched her video hundreds of times and cried. A little girl from South Africa wrote that, after hearing Mira's story, she had picked up her grandmother's broken violin and started learning again. Some people even sent drawings and poems they made after listening to her music. For someone who had never even dreamed of leaving her village, this was all overwhelming. She read each letter with care, but she didn't answer most of them. She believed that her music had already spoken for her. And in her heart, she didn't want to be pulled into a life of interviews, shows, and constant travel. She had seen that world, and though she respected it, she knew it wasn't hers. But the world wouldn't stop chasing her one day. A representative from the Ministry of Culture visited the village. He wore a formal suit and brought with him a beautifully framed certificate. The government had decided to honor Mira with a national award for her contribution to music. She was invited to Delhi to receive it directly from the President of India. The villagers celebrated again. Children danced, drums played. People decorated the school walls with flowers and paper ribbons. Mira accepted the invitation, but only because she felt it might help her students get more attention. "If this brings better facilities to our school, I will go," she said. When she arrived in Delhi, the hotel they gave her was bigger than any building she had ever seen. People rushed around her, asking what she needed, offering clothes, jewelry, even makeup. Mira wore her simple sari and carried her old violin case like always. At the award ceremony, surrounded by politicians, celebrities, and powerful people, she walked on stage with quiet dignity. The hall was filled with applause when her name was called. When she received the award, the president smiled and asked, "What is the secret of your music?" She looked up and replied softly, "I don't play for people's praise. I play to talk to something inside me." That sentence was printed in newspapers the next day. After returning from Delhi, something unexpected happened. The village school, where Mira had taught for years under the neem tree, was suddenly flooded with applications. Parents from cities and nearby towns wanted to send their children to learn under the genius from the village. Donations started coming in. A few well-wishers offered to build a proper music hall for the children. The government also promised funds to improve the school's facilities. At first, Mira didn't know what to do. She never wanted to become an institution, just wanted to teach a few students and play her music in peace. But then she saw her students' eyes. They were excited. They had dreams now bigger than the village, bigger than even Mira's own. And she realized that maybe her music wasn't just for herself anymore. Maybe it was meant to open doors for others too. So she said yes. Construction started on a small music school right next to the neem tree. Mira made sure it was simple and peaceful. No grand buildings, no air conditioning, just clean classrooms, wooden floors, and lots of natural light. The place was named Surkagar, which means home of melody. It welcomed students from all backgrounds. Whether they came with money or not, didn't matter, only their love for music did. As the years passed, Mira continued teaching every single day. She taught with the same warmth, the same discipline, and the same belief. Don't chase perfection, chase truth. More than skills, she helped her students connect with their emotions. Some went on to become famous musicians, others became teachers, and some just learned enough to play for joy.
But
Every single student remembered her lessons not just for what she taught, but how she lived. Arjun Rao remained in touch through all these years. He often visited the school, sometimes to teach, sometimes just to listen. He had changed completely. Fame no longer mattered to him the way it used to. After traveling the world, he had finally realized that greatness wasn't just about stages and awards. It was about honesty. And Mira had given him that lesson without ever trying to. One rainy afternoon, Arjun sat with Mira on the school steps as raindrops danced on the rooftop. He turned to her and said, "You know, Mira, the world talks about you like you're a mystery. Some call you a miracle. Some call you a genius. But to me, you're just ... free." Mira laughed softly. "I'm not a genius, Arjun. I'm just someone who never stopped listening." "Listening to what?" he asked. "To the silence inside me. It's where all my music comes from." Those words stayed with Arjun forever. One year, a group of filmmakers came to make a documentary on Mira's life. She agreed only if they promised to focus on her students and not just her story. The film, titled The Silence That Sings, was shown in festivals across the globe. It won several awards, but more importantly, it touched hearts. People from all cultures found something familiar in her story: humility, resilience, and the power of simple things. In one of the final scenes of the film, Mira is shown teaching a new child how to hold the violin. The child struggles. The notes come out wrong, but Mira doesn't scold. She simply sits beside the child and plays the same note gently until the child joins in. Slowly, shakily, but with a smile. That was Mira's true magic. She never pushed, never judged. She just waited, like the earth waits for rain, and when the right moment came, her music would bloom through others. Years passed. Mira grew older. Her hair turned silver, and her hands became slower. But her love for music never faded. Even when she stopped performing in public, she continued to teach, continued to listen. And then one day, she passed away peacefully in her sleep, holding her violin close to her heart. The news spread like wildfire. Across the country, concerts were held in her memory. Musicians lit candles and played her favorite pieces. People who had never met her cried as if they had lost someone personal. In her village, the entire community gathered under the neem tree. Her students, now grown up, played her lullaby together, and it felt like her soul was dancing with the wind. They buried her under the tree where it all began, and beside it, they placed a stone with just one sentence carved into it. She listened, and the world finally heard. Years later, children still come to Surkagar to learn music. They sit where she once sat, hold their instruments, the way she taught, and played notes that speak of truth, love, and memory. And somewhere in the silence between those notes, if one listens closely enough, they can still hear her presence, not in applause, not in awards, but in the soft, honest music of a life lived purely. That was Mira, and that was her story.